I'm very honored to be here. This conversation is a result, thank you, of the conversation Sanjay and I had back in July of last year. And I'm very impressed, as was Roger, to see the number and level and quality of participants that we have for this event. What I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about what we see as the emerging trends in the connected vehicle. I've been working in this space for almost 15 years to bring us to the point of where we are now. And the world is becoming aware of the benefits of having a vehicle that can communicate road, weather, and traffic information to other vehicles, not necessarily the operator, but to other vehicles themselves, to advance us along a path of automation to get us to the point where there are no deaths or accidents or crashes. For those who are not familiar with it, the Connected Vehicle Trade Association is an international nonprofit business league that was formed about 11 years ago at the request of the automakers to advance where we're going in this space. Our company's membership board includes companies like Intel and Cisco and Nokia and Visteon and Verizon, and there's 17 different industry groups that are represented in 15 different countries. Some of the trends that we're going to talk about are the vehicle-to-vehicle, vehicle-to-infrastructure, and vehicle-to-device types of communications, infotainment and user interface interactions, data and security, processors and sensors, self-learning systems, automated systems, and then finally open source. And because I have just a few minutes to give this talk, I'm going to touch on all of these topics at a fairly high level, and then during the course of this conference, a number of the speakers are going to delve into those areas. A couple of years ago, in order to help people understand how the communications profiles fit into this environment, we created what we call the cube. And what this cube does is it has three axes here. One axis is the vertical. So you have a safety vertical. Safety is entirely the purview of the automakers. No one else has that liability, and so that's their responsibility. Mobility is a responsibility of the transportation agencies. They're not going to tell you to get off the road because there's a crash up ahead, because all that does is push the traffic, the congestion, the more road maintenance to the arterials. They're concerned about the major flow of traffic to events, on everyday traffic, or in emergencies. And then you have everything else, which we just class as commercial services. And then there's 5 primary bidirectional communication protocols. You have radio, you have satellite, you have cellular, you have Wi-Fi, and you have dedicated short-range communication. Dedicated short-range communication is the one that was identified. It's at 5.9 gigahertz. It has the lowest latency of any communication protocol, which means it communicates faster than anything else. But it only has a range of about 300 meters. That makes it perfect for communicating vehicle to vehicle. And then you have the different devices themselves. They're either embedded, built in by the automaker, they're added as an aftermarket device, or they're what we call nomadic devices. It's a phone or a tablet, some device that's physically carried into the car. And so when you look at where things are, all the vehicle-to-vehicle safety communications occur here. They only occur under DSRC, and they only occur where they're either embedded into the car or connected through an aftermarket device. Things like satellite radio or personal navigation devices, they all have their own profile in terms of which communication protocol they use, which vertical they support, and which device type exists. And so when people talk about the internet in the car, they're really talking about just 2 areas here, either cellular-based Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi hotspots itself. When they talk about how are we going to provision information to all cars, 80% of the cars, at least in the United States, all have a satellite communication chip in it. And one of the things they're looking at is how to better utilize that. So when we talk about vehicle-to-vehicle, and vehicle-to-the-infrastructure, and vehicle-to-device communications, we're really talking about the road, weather, and safety traffic information that's communicated from a vehicle to another vehicle. Typical vehicle, it has traction sensors on it that know when the analog brakes are firing. It has a temperature gauge in the car that knows when it's below freezing. Therefore, the car knows when you're on ice, and it even knows when you're on black ice. Well, that's incredibly important to tell the car right behind you, or the car coming at that spot, to let you know what that condition is. Similarly, accelerometers in the wheels can determine what the severity and with the GPS information, the location is of a pothole or of a road obstruction. And you can capture that information and send it off to the Departments of Transportation, and they can do two very important things with it. Because as hundreds of cars drive across all of the roadways, they now have a living picture of where the road is deteriorating the worst, where it's deteriorating the fastest, and where they need to triage their repairs. And that saves everyone time and money. And then you have the ability to look at whether or not these vehicles can determine what the weather is. Doppler radar can tell you where rain is falling from the sky, but only the car knows if that rain is actually hitting the ground. And it knows because your windshield wipers are on. So knowing what cars have what windshield wipers on allows you to very specifically understand what the weather patterns are. And during severe weather conditions, during hurricanes or tornadoes or typhoons or monsoons, that becomes critically important to know whether the path that you're on is going to take you safely to the destination you're going to. In the United States, our government within the next year and a half will mandate that all new vehicles be able to transmit and receive a basic safety message from other vehicles and the infrastructure. This will be using the DSRC protocol. This also opens the door to many non-vehicle and road users. There are people that are looking at putting these devices in cellular phones. Apple's looking at putting them in bicycles and in motorcycles so that all the other road users, the driver or at least the car, can be made aware of where there is a person or a vehicle or a thing on the road that might create an obstruction or a problem. When we look at that, the other aspect, what we call infotainment, the information and entertainment, and the user interfaces that are implied, what we're seeing in the United States is that 63% of car buyers won't purchase a vehicle that doesn't have the technology they wanted. This is a very new thing for automakers. They're used to putting in a common denomination of basic technology that they know everyone will want and optioning everything else. But now if you're a car maker that doesn't offer particular technology, the demographic that normally bought your car may leave and go to another one. Consumers are asking the cars to have the intuitive touchscreen, rich multimedia capabilities, the navigation and the internet connectivity that they're used to on their consumer portable devices. The fundamental problem with that is that those devices have the exact opposite user interface paradigm than does the car. They're designed, a phone, a laptop, any type of pneumatic device, for you to focus your attention on and interact with. In a car, the general rule of thumb is that you have 2 seconds to locate a control, capture a reading, activate a device, and return your attention to driving. Because at just 40 kilometers an hour, you've traveled the distance of this room without looking at the road. At 80 kilometers, you've traveled twice the distance of this room with your eyes off the road. And so that is the problem that we have with people in that environment that say, well, take what I did for the phone or for the laptop or the tablet, and let's just put it on the dash. Well, it doesn't work that way because it's a completely different user interface. And we even know that the other issues are with driver distraction. If I have not talking on the phone, not with a headset, not with anything. If I'm not talking on the phone, my reaction time is a very well understood process of how long before I would react to an emergency. If I have a Bluetooth headset on, I have the same delay in my responsiveness as if I'm talking to somebody sitting next to me, which is about 30%, 10 to 30% more time than it takes. So as we now move into the experience of what we want to have happen on the dash, if we take what we do on the phone and you actually look at that, how much time you look at touching the screen, moving things, accessing things, that amount of time is incompatible with being able to drive. And as we move towards more automation, the car I currently have, it will keep in the lines by itself, which, as I drove through Delhi the other day, I realized that driving in the lines was sort of only a suggestion. But it also will brake rather than hit another car in front of me. But what they're finding is as we put more automation in the cars, our reaction time to recover and take control of the vehicle now can be as long as 8 times as long as it was before. So we've got a transition to go through to understand that. But in order to understand where we want to go, the automakers realize that people want that look and feel. So above the dash, for how you interface with your car to tune your radio or to make a call, they're now starting to allow it to have Apple's CarPlay or Android or their own method as a choice that you have in order to do that. Microsoft is focusing on its Metro user interface for its Windows in the Car feature. And there's always a question of robustness. I can't reboot my car because something crashed in the operating system. If I have to do that, I'm not going to buy that kind of car. So the kind of programming that's typically done on the handset in the market is difficult. You have to have a robustness level that you're not used to. If you have an app that has a problem on your phone, you throw it away and get another one that looks just like it. If you have an app with a problem on your car, who do you go see? The dealer? They pretty much don't know how this works anyway. And my car had a problem last summer where the navigation system thought my home was GM's tech center. So I called the dealer up and I said, you need to reset my nav system. And he said, you have to leave the car for 24 hours. And I said, why? He said, because we have to wipe all the software in your car and reload it. I'm like, thank God you're not my phone company. When we look at how much data a typical car can generate, and it's growing. Right now, the typical vehicle on the road in the US and Europe can generate 1 billion gigabytes a year. Now, only a very small fraction of that information is attributable to the driver and your actual path of where you're going. Every time you pop a door lock or change a radio or adjust the temperature, those are part of that 1 billion gigabytes of data that's transmitted. So the part that takes are useful and usable is a very, very small piece. Once cellular and Wi-Fi gateways are open to the car, your data your car holds can be at risk from corruption, criminal, and malicious attack. Since 2012, I have chaired the U.S. Secretary of Transportation's Security Subcommittee, and just so everyone knows, we have never had a malicious attack in the wild in a vehicle. Every attack that's occurred on a vehicle has been by white hat researchers or companies that are looking to get into this space, or practitioners in environment or academicians. What we are concerned about is the fact that as cars will soon have as many as 100 million lines of code, and to give you an understanding, the Boeing 777 Dreamliner only has 4 million lines of code. So now that a car may have 100 million lines of code, there's a very well understood algorithm in terms of how many bugs actually exist in finalized code. And it's about 1 for every 4,000 lines of code. So you're now looking at 100 million lines of code having 25,000 bugs in it. They can tolerate a bug on your tablet or your phone because you just reboot it. But can you tolerate a bug in your analog brakes or your airbag deployment system? And the software policy framework to manage all of this currently doesn't exist, because all of these software and systems are put in by a multitude of tier 1, tier 2 suppliers that feed the automakers. It's not as if one system is being built to address it all. Right now, a typical car may have as many as 600 sensors on board, and we're expecting that number to reach over 1,000 in the next few years. Typically, these sensors have been allowed to allow the vehicles to perform safely under a wide variety of road, weather, and traffic conditions. How your anti-lock brakes and traction control works on dry pavement is much different than how it performs on wet dirt or gravel. And all of that has to be modeled into the system. Advanced systems can monitor vital statistics like brain activity, eye movement, heart rate of a driver, and to display all the possible information from the heart attack to sleeplessness. In fact, Ford has a very large department working nothing on human biometrics because it recognizes there's an aging population that really needs to have more of that information at their ready, or in order to be able to manage where they're going themselves. And they're soon going to be able a sensor to measure the level of alcohol from the driver's sweat and the additional processing ability to sound an alarm when it will detect inconsistent driving. Interestingly, though, the growth of Uber and Lyft has created a very large drop in the number of accidents and deaths due to drunk driving, because that service that's now available has become very prevalent in use by people that have been out drinking. everybody sort of understands the concept of a personal assistant. A device that sits there and connected to the internet, does advanced type of searches, starts to recognize what your needs are, what your wants are, what your things you do are. Those systems are being developed that are going to factor in your driver calendar. Monday through Friday, you may drive certain paths to get from point A to point B to go to work and back. Certain days, you may take children to school or to ball games during a certain season. And so time and day and how the weather affects the length of your drive. As in snowy areas, it may take you longer to do that same drive, and you may want to take alternate paths or have different ways to do it. You do that all in your head right now, and some people are using it through apps on their phone to do that. But the reality is that if we can get the information to the cloud and back and have that processed and stored there, we don't have to process it in the car. I pretty much, a different case, I travel all over the world, I speak many different places, but if you get up every day and drive to work and come back, and you shop at certain stores, you probably don't vary the grocery stores that you shop at or the pharmacies that you visit or where you take dry cleaning or childcare or schoolwork or anything else. Those things can all be monitored. And they can make life a lot easier for you in terms of knowing how to get there and where you're going to go and allow you to focus more of the task at hand. And as this technology continues to advance, the drivers will be able to do much more with their cars that help make everyday life more convenient. With the growth in 4G and long-term evolution, almost all the non-real-time data processing can be moved to cloud and seamlessly enhancing your drive, opening up a tremendous opportunity for new services to be created, for new things that the driver can be able to have. When we look at this space, we don't look at saying, well, how do we take the data and just do something with it more for transportation data? We look at it and saying, how do we pair that with retail data or industry data or social data to discover where new markets are? Because the reality is that no one's going to be doing more business with the same customers for the most part. We're going to have to discover where that new value lies and how to capitalize on it. In terms of automated systems, the progression to automation is already in progress. As I mentioned, the car I have will keep it in its line and it will not brake. Systems that are now available will allow your vehicle's position in your lane, brake automatically, or at least warn you when you need to brake. It automatically adjusts your traction control and your analog brakes based on the road surface and the weather conditions. None of this existed 8 years ago. And in the United States, people keep their cars an average of 11 and a half years. So the typical car in the United States is a little bit less than 6 years old. So if you think about that, two things are sitting out there as opportunities. One is that if I bought a new car last year, I won't get another new car in all likelihood for another 9 years. By the time 9 years rolls around, the level of technology change will be incredible. And we've already had meetings with the Secretary in Washington to say in 10 years, we may have to issue driver's license like we issue pilot licenses for planes. A pilot's license may be you have to have single engine, dual engine prop, or jet engine. In cars, it may be based on the level of automation that you're familiar and accomplished with. We're all at level 0 now if you can drive. But 10 years from now, someone who's 10 years old or 8 years old may never have driven a car that doesn't have a certain amount of automation. They may not physically be able to drive a car that has no automation. And so that's something to be considered going forward as well. The other thing is that new driver and safety assistance systems, they can park your car autonomously, they can maintain a safe distance between your car and highway speeds, and they can automatically adjust the steering and braking conditions without the driver interaction. And this isn't new technology. In 2003, when I went to visit Honda in Utsunomiya, Japan, I got off the train and rented a Honda from a car rental agency that had a $3,500 option on it at the time, this is again 2003, that would stay inside its lanes and not hit the car in front of it. So the technology is not new, but there's a liability ensuring that it works all the time. Because if that system fails, the automakers are going to be sued. Last thing we want to talk about is open source. Everything that's been done in the automotive community has tended to be very proprietary. The tier ones, the sub-tiers, the automakers, they all had very unique ways of protecting their systems by what I'll call security by obscurity. They all had their own ways of programming. That made it very expensive for anybody to do anything. And so There are now several options that all of the automakers are participating in to figure out how to reduce their cost and to make this stuff go better, more simple. Automotive Grade Limits is an open collaboration between contributors from the automotive industry, the communications industry, the semiconductor, academia, and others that are combining open source components into core operating system software stacks suitable for automotive applications. Geneva is a nonprofit alliance that committed to driving the broad adoption of specified open source in-vehicle infotainment software. Geneva software actually came from Mobilin software. Mobilin software is the software that's embedded in all mobile phones. But there was a subset of it that was appropriate to say we can use this in the car for in-vehicle infotainment. And so Wind River and Intel, a number of years ago, went forward with creating an organization that allows all the automakers to participate in. And the Open Automotive Alliance is a global alliance of technology and auto industry leaders that are committed to bringing Android to the car. Black Duck also provides open source governance and compliance solutions and strategic open source policy development. And understand, when we look at the car, we start talking about what is an issue of the security aspects of it, we have to address data and security on a number of different levels. We have to address it as who owns the data. All the automakers will tell you that they believe they're the custodian of the owner's data. Every automotive company has somebody or a group of people working very hard internally to determine how to monetize that data. And so the question is always one of, well, okay, how do I, once I open the gateway to a car, how do I secure it? How do I secure that if you have credit card information embedded in your car for towing purposes, that someone can't use that someone can't capture that without your knowledge and misuse that to their information. So open source is working very hard right now on trying to address all those issues as well, because it can address many of the other issues in terms of commonality. And finally, we believe that we are at the beginning of a period of transformative change. It's a change that we've been building on for a number of years now, 11 or 12 years from the start, pretty much in the dark. There's a lot of confusion still in the media because people tend to take what they understand about the internet and Wi-Fi and their access to data and apps and translate that into their car in terms of how they want it to work. And although the look and feel can be the same, the actual functioning is completely different. The car was a hardened shell, and it had what we call reactive safety. Whatever happened that it sensed to the road condition, it could react to that. And it's now becoming a collective member, a cooperative member with collective intelligence, awareness, and communications. And I'll give you an example. The Google car, which many people have heard of, that vehicle doesn't communicate with the outside world. It has to have all the computational capability to do rulemaking and decisions without that because it's entirely reactive. It has what we call first-level knowledge. First-level knowledge says if a ball rolls out in the street, it can stop or avoid it. We, as humans, have second-order knowledge. Second-order knowledge is that if a ball rolls out in the street, our parallel first thought is that a child may be following it out afterwards. To get from first order to second order is multiple magnitudes of information processing, rule generation, and data assessment. But now imagine your car can communicate to the outside world. Sanjay's car drives through a neighborhood and it receives information that this is an area where children have played. He can leave a geo-marker for that specific place hanging in the air so that my car approaching from half a kilometer away now becomes aware and I can be predictively safe rather than reactively safe. That gives me a margin of safety that we've never had before. It's given us that over-the-horizon visibility in terms of weather, roads, conditions, of things that we need to have in order to go forward. And without that, you can't move to a further level of automation. You can't rely on automation to react to every condition. It has to offload that processing so that you're doing something that provides a safe and efficient drive. All of those changes are going to allow us to move with safety with predictive capabilities to avoid congestion, bad road surface, and remotely and reroute intelligently and efficiently. Every one of these things that I just talked about has a rich opportunity for new businesses, for new partnerships, for new systems, and to leverage existing capability. So what I'd like to leave you with is that you don't necessarily have to be in any one of these or all of them or some of them. Whatever you're doing, you need to be aware of them. Because vehicle connectivity, vehicle communications are part of the future of the fabric of transportation, that all systems, all things, if you're not participating with it, will become subservient to it. Thank you very much.